Do you ever have the thing that you can't even do it? Well, that's what we're doing today with Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, because, oh boy, this was something. And in today's story, we're gonna see how, in 3 years, we can see that they have no plan and that they have to wing it. This is the complicated history of Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, Part 1. Chapter 1. The Announcement. On January 14th, 2019, Tom Cruise sent a tweet on Twitter, now named X, with a small video saying, Summer 2021 and Summer 2022. With the director of the last two films, Chris McQuarrie, says, Missions accepted. Once principal filming on Top Gun Maverick, another movie with Cruise, finished in June 2019, they were planning to return old cast members and to add some new ones. Originally, they were planning to shoot the film on February 20th, 2020, under the working title Libra, in Venice, Italy. They wanted to do an action stunt during Carnival Venice, an annual celebration known for all the masks and all that. However, before they actually started filming, something came out that, well, I'm pretty sure all of us know. Insert clip now.
Breaking news, stay at home. That is the order tonight from 4 state governors as the coronavirus pandemic spreads. New York, California, Illinois, and Connecticut all ordering non-essential employees to stay home. Those orders cover 75 million people across the United States. New York's governor today telling non-essential businesses in his state to reduce their workforce to zero.
On Hollywood Boulevard tonight, an eerie silence. Like most of Hollywood, it's gone dark thanks to the coronavirus.
Chapter 2. The Pandemic. On February 24th, 2020, Paramount Pictures stated that for all their upcoming releases, they would stop production until things slowed down. And although it kept its summer 2021 release for July 23rd, the crew would know that it wouldn't last forever. And they were right. In April, the film was delayed to November 19th, 2021, nearly 4 months later. So the crew had accepted that, yeah, we're gonna have to wait it out a bit. On July 6, 2020, the crew received special permission in the Europe area to resume filming in September 2020. So yeah, crisis averted, no more things, so yeah, the crew can get back to work. In August, while waiting for their, that Tom Cruise and the stunt team were planning to do all the stunts for all the films, including the most obscene stunts in the movie, as Chris McQuarrie stated. So yeah, and he was even scared of his own plans, like if it was going to fail. However, during stunt planning, they ran into more problems again. On August 13th, 2020, in Oxfordshire, England, during one of the stunts, a motorcycle got on fire, leading because the fire and the wheels and all that stuff that I don't even want to mention. Thankfully, Tom Cruise was doing a helicopter jump for another scene. However, that did mean that he did get angry. This won't be the last time we get to see him angry. Chapter 3. The filming process. On September 6, 2020, the crew was ready to film the movie again by doing one of the most dangerous stunts of the movie, the motorcycle cliff scene. After filming the most intense stunt yet, they finished a lot of scenes in Norway in October, and they were ready to return to Italy on October 6, 2020. However, 20 days later, the pandemic caught back to them again when one of the crew members got tested positive for the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, they only had to isolate for like a week, but as for Tom Cruise, I think he took it very well. Like, I wonder what happened during that meeting.
We are creating thousands of jobs, you I don't ever want to see it again. Ever. And if you don't do it, you're fired. And I see you do it again, you're gone.
So that was something. Later on, Tom would later apologize, and principal filming would wrap up in February 2021. However, they were not quite done yet. They just needed one more shot to be done. Chapter 4: The Bridge. Going back a bit, the crew were looking for a bridge for an insane action stunt to blow up an actual bridge. Originally, they wanted to do it in the Swiss Alps. However, once the government and the people found out about the idea, they hated it and they chose to pick another bridge. And thus, they found another one. However, before they actually began to film it, another movie, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, was using the same railway. And thus, they waited until 2021. Oh yeah, there is one more thing I wanted to mention. While looking, they actually wanted to blow up another bridge in Poland. But again, people were very not happy, and they were actually thinking that they were working with shady people. Yeah, good job, Paramount team. Yeah. And thus, they had to build a train from scratch and then let it jump off a homemade railway, and it was finally completed. All the scenes were done in August 2021, and they were planning to release the film on May 27th, 2022. September 30th, 2022? July 12th, 2023? Oh, thank God, no beep. Chapter 5: The Release. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 had its premiere on the Spanish Steps in Rome, Italy on June 19th, 2023, and then ran to theaters, on July 12th, 2023. However, it had a massive budget. And when I mean massive, it got to $300 million. $300 million! And you know what's worse? They called it a flop. From what I heard online, the film has to make 3 times its budget to even call it a success. And since it had $330 million, that might be a problem. So you want to know how much it made? $172 million domestically and $566 million worldwide. It didn't make it all the way. It was redeemed a box office flop. Either it be from Indiana Jones, The Sound of Freedom, Oppenheimer, Barbie, which Oppenheimer took a lot of the IMAX screenings, no one really cared about going to your movie. Because, this came out during the same time as a certain strike that I won't say online, even if it might be finished. Yeah. As for critics and audiences, they actually kind of liked it. Not that much of a big, but they enjoyed it. Yeah. But at the end of the day, you have to realize that your ego might get a better of you, you lose a lot of money, and you realize they have to make part 2 in 2024. Good job, Paramount team. Good job. Of all the animated films, Nimona has to be the lucky one of barely surviving after it was initially cancelled. And in today's story, we're gonna see how, I don't know how long years, we're gonna see how it nearly survived cancellation and why we never trust Disney with anything. This is The Complicated History of Nimona. Chapter 1: The Clear Blue Sky. In June of 2015, 20th Century Fox, now called 20th Century Studios, bought the film rights to the webcomic, graphic novel, or whatever you call it, of the same name, and put it to work at Blue Sky Studios, the same people that gave us the Ice Age franchise. As for directing duties, Patrick Osborne, who worked on the Disney animated short film Feast, was given the position. Eventually, in June 2017, they announced that the film would come to theaters on February 14th, 2020, and that animation would begin sometime around that time frame, which is good since they were about to release Ferdinand in December 2017, and they were trying to finish up Spies in Disguise. Everything was looking so well. However, in March of 2019, Blue Sky was not ready for this. Roll the clip.
And breaking news, the blockbuster Disney deal, the parent company of ABC buying many of the assets of 21st Century Fox, creating an entertainment giant.
The blockbuster deal between 21st Century Fox and Disney that shook up the news and entertainment world today involves two very different corporate cultures.
Your deal for Disney and 21st Century Fox, as well as consumers. The new combined company will include Fox's movie and TV studios and cable networks, and together the two companies will have 46 million subscribers around the world.
Chapter 2: The House of Mouse. In March of 2019, the Walt Disney Company had required 20th Century Fox for more than $50 billion. That is a lot of money. Just for what? The Simpsons, Avatar, the rest of the X-Men characters? I don't know what I'm saying anymore. Later on, in May 2019, it was announced that the film would be delayed to March 5th, 2021, which is not really that much of a delay since Spies in Disguise would have been released on Christmas Day 2019, and that would have caused some problems. But of course, we're not out of the clear yet. In November, it was stated that the film would be delayed once again to January 14th, 2022. And throughout 2020, everyone at Blue Sky Studios said that the film would come in 2022, even if there was a pandemic. Although Patrick Osborne left in March 2020, leaving directing duties to Nick Bruno and Troy Quane, who previously worked on Spies in Disguise. By the beginning of 2021, everything was looking great. The animation is doing well. They had an all-star cast featuring Chloe Grace Moretz and Riz Ahmed, and they were still aiming for that January 2022 release. But of course, Disney just had to be Disney. Chapter 3: The End. On February 9th, 2021, Disney announced that they would be shutting down Blue Sky Studios on April 10th, 2021, laying off more than 100 employees. When it was announced, the animation was around 75% complete and was on track to finish in October. Yeah, Disney just had to shut down a studio because of money. By March of 2021, everyone who was working at the film were trying to shop around the movie to other studios. As for Blue Sky, their last project, Ice Age Tales, releasing in April 2022, would be their final thing. And at the end of the final episode, not the end, they said this. Dear friends and followers, for the past 34 years, we, like our single-minded character Scrat, have reached for something that, at times, seemed unattainable. Yet time after time, we've managed to get our arms around our own versions of that exclusive acorn. Unfortunately, it's not possible to hold on to everything forever. We've had more fun bringing our movies to life than anyone should be allowed. We hope you've been able to feel some of that joy. Thank you from the bottom of our blue sky hearts for being with us all those years. With tremendous gratitude, co-founder Chris Edge and your friends at Blue Sky Studios.
I'm not crying, you're crying. Shut up. Like I said earlier, some of the crew wanted the film to be made, so they shopped it around to different studios. But in April 2022, they found someone.
Chapter 4: The Redemption? Enter Empire Pictures, a new, semi-new to the movie business. On April 10th, 2022, it was announced that they picked up the film rights and that they were going to release the movie. Yippee! Crisis averted! And they were gonna release it alongside Netflix to distribute the movie for a summer 2023 release. As for the animation, it would be finished by DNEG Animation. And it was also announced that Chloe Grace Moretz and Riz Ahmed would stay for the movie. And by the end of 2022, they finished the movie. Chapter 5: The Release. Nimona premiered at the 2023 Annecy International Film Festival on June 14th, 2023. Later, it premiered in a limited theater release on June 23rd, and then premiered on Netflix on June 30th, 2023. And it was a massive hit. It managed to get more than a couple of million watch hours, which is insane, because it was a movie that was dumped and then saved. Who would have guessed? This reminds me of another movie, but who knows.
But by the end of the day, you realize that there are some gems in the rubble that had a troubled production.
Out of all the DC movies released out of the DCEU, Blue Beetle had to be the one where, oh my god, how did it survive?
And in today's story, we're gonna see how this miracle movie survived being released on HBO Max, and it survived the reign of David Zaslav. This is
The Complicated History of Blue Beetle. Chapter 1: The Announcement. In November 2018, Warner Brothers would announce that they would be working on a movie about Blue Beetle. However, they weren't quite ready yet. Mostly because the year prior, Justice League had a release, and it lost millions of dollars for Warner Brothers. It wouldn't be until Aquaman in December 2018, where it was a success, making $1 billion worldwide, underneath Harry Potter The Deathly Hallows Part 2 and Barbie. But in December 2020, it would be an HBO Max exclusive as a mid-budget movie. And they later would confirm that in 2021. And at least they're still making the movie. Chapter 2: The Smooth Pre-Production. In February 2021, it was announced that Angel Manuel Soto would direct the film. Later on in August, Soto talked to Solo Manuela after seeing his role in Cobra Kai.
During one dinner with Soto and Miranda, Soto said, "Hey, wanna be Blue Beetle?" And then Miranda said, "Whoa, okay." And then he cried. Anyway, back onto our story.
Now with the crew ready, they started filming in May 2022 around Georgia, Texas, and Puerto Rico. But around that same time, things were changing not only for the movie, but for the entire company. Chapter 3: The New Leader. After multiple box office bombs for Warner Brothers like Wonder Woman 1984 and The Matrix Resurrections, not only that AT&T left Warner Brothers and had to sell it to the guy that ran the Discovery Channel, forming, as we know today, Warner Brothers Discovery, with our good old pal David Zaslav. Or is it Zaslav? Who knows. But going back into the movie, they would wrap up filming in July of 2022. But going on to the post-production, trouble was ahead. In August, it was announced that the Batgirl movie would be cancelled in the post-production stages, leading people to think that Blue Beetle may not survive. But it did, with a sacrifice. In April of 2022, it was announced that James Gunn, the director of the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise, would handle DC's movie division as a co-CEO, and announced that Blue Beetle would be the first project in the new DCU. Very creative name, guys. But going back a bit to December 2021, the movie was upgraded to a theatrical release so that it could, make money. Chapter 4: The Release. Blue Beetle had a special screening in El Paso, Texas on August 15th, 2023. Meanwhile, in Hollywood, it would premiere at the TCL Chinese Man Theater on that same day. However, because of the ongoing writers and actors strike at the time, the cast didn't show up, but Soto said that they were like heroes.
And then on August 18th, 2023, it would premiere everywhere. When it premiered, its box office didn't go well as planned. It started with $44 million, which isn't that bad, especially with competition like Barbie, Meg 2, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and Gran Turismo. But when it continued, it became DC's lowest grossing movie, with $72.5 million domestically and $129.3 million worldwide. Although its reception is good, it's a sign that, of course, the DCEU is ending. Why not? But at the end of the day, you realize James Gunn is the only way to fix your cinematic universe.
"10 years ago, a little movie called The Amazing Spider-Man 2 premiered at theaters, and it was something to say the least."
And in this episode, we're going to see how Sony can be the very, very greedy and why Spider-Man just doesn't work with Sony. This is
The Complicated History of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Chapter 1: The Announcement. Sometime after working on the first Amazing Spider-Man movie, Sony announced a sequel, and in March 2011, they hired James Vanderbilt to write the script. In 2012, Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone announced that they would return to their characters as Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy. Also, it's worth mentioning that those two were contracted to make a third one, but we'll talk about that later. Then, throughout 2012 to 2013, several cast members were announced, like Jamie Foxx, Dane DeHaan, Chris Cooper were announced to be part of the cast, and some rumors were speculating that J.K. Simmons could return as J. Jonah Jameson, which he last played in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3 in 2007.
However, one particular cast member joined the cast, and that was Shailene Woodley to play Mary Jane Watson in 2012, and even got some shots filmed by March 2013. But by June, she was cut out of the film to make more of a Gwen and Peter storyline. As for Shailene, and that, ladies and gentlemen, was a smart move.
Chapter 2: The Filming. On February 3rd, 2013, the director, Mark Webb, posted on Twitter, or X, that they began filming with a 35mm camera, an odd choice instead of using a digital camera, and it was also stated that it would be the first Spider-Man film entirely shot in the New York state. But with some upsides, there were some problems. The VFX team had to work on film instead of going digital, and it took nearly a year. Nonetheless, filming wrapped on June 25th, 2013. And then it was the final touches, like making it post-converted to 2D to 3D, and it was mixed in Dolby Atmos and RO 11.1 in the William Holton Theater. And thus, the movie was completed, and they just had to wait for that 2014 release. Chapter 3: The Release. When the film released on May 2nd, 2014, it was accompanied with a mid-credit X-Men Days of the Future Past teaser after it premiered in London on April 10th, 2014, and a Tokyo premiere on March 31st, 2014. The reason why the Days of the Future Past teaser showed up is because Mark Webb signed a deal with 20th Century Fox, the film rights to the X-Men franchise, for them to show up for a teaser trailer for a new reboot-ish thing. As for critics and audiences, it was mostly 50-50, but the main reason is that they try to play it too safe after the dark reboot-ish thingy of the first Amazing Spider-Man movie.
Money-wise, they did okay, making $91.6 million opening weekend, $202 million domestically, and $709 million worldwide, even if it had some tough competition like Captain America the Winter Soldier, Neighbors, and the Lego Movie. So overall, it did okay. But a couple months later is where everything went wrong.
Chapter 4: The Aftermath. In 2013, they announced an Amazing Spider-Man 3, most likely to come in 2016, and a fourth film possibly considering a 2018 release. But remember what the mouse says. If you give a mouse a cookie, he wants some milk. If he gets the milk, he wants an entire spin-off franchise with a 2-part Sinister Six movie, Black Cat, Spider-Man 2099, and the only one to ever release, Venom. So don't trust the mouse. But in December 2013, Andrew Garfield and Mark Webb said that they were unlikely to make a third movie.
However, later that same year, something happened, which is the Sony email hack. Of course, it all started because of a movie called The Interview, which is set in North Korea, and it probably pissed off North Korea. And it revealed too much stuff from their emails. Some of them included Gwen Stacy being resurrected as Carnage in The Amazing Spider-Man 4, asking Sam Raimi if his Spider-Man can face off their Spider-Man, and the major one, asking Disney if they can include Spider-Man in Captain America Civil War. But at the end of the day, Sony is very, very greedy over Spider-Man.
Almost 25 years ago, Toy Story 2 premiered in theaters, and it was a massive hit, making the newly formed Pixar a household name. But the making of this movie wasn't quite good, and I would say it was complicated.
And in today's story, we're going to figure out how this movie was planned for a direct-to-DVD sequel, and it was almost deleted except for one person. This is
The Complicated History on Toy Story 2. Chapter 1: The Idea. Around the time of the first Toy Story's release, Pixar's co-CEO at the time, John Lasseter was traveling after working on the first Toy Story.
Anyway, at an airport, John saw a little kid go up to his dad and like, "Hey Dad, I found this cool Woody doll." And I think his dad was like, "Wow, that's nice. Anyway, I'm gonna go get milk. That's like hundreds of miles away. So have fun with your Woody doll." Listen kid, he's never coming back. Also, I should do a sequel.
Later on in 1996, Disney and Pixar were in talks to make a Toy Story sequel, but instead of making it going into theaters, Disney said, "Hey, we're doing some direct-to-home media sequels to our old movies, and we were wondering if a Toy Story sequel could work in that format." So on March 12, 1997, during a press meeting, it was announced that a sequel to Toy Story would come to VHS sometime in 1998 or in 1999. But there was one problem. Chapter 2: The Problem. When the sequel was announced, they quickly realized that all of their 300 animators were trying to finish up A Bug's Life set for that Thanksgiving 1998 release. So, to combat this, they hired 95 animators of their computer game department, and Steve Jobs, Pixar's CEO at the time, shut down the department. They're like, "Hey, we're gonna let you do that, so no more video games." Although they had some problems, like making the humans not look like toys, and adding 2 million dust particles, everything was looking okay. But then came November 1997, when some Disney executives looked at the film and said, "We love the story, and we decided we're giving it a theatrical release." Wait, what? So not only did they have to finish the movie by the 1999 deadline, but they also needed to be theater-worthy. Then, in 1998, the movie was almost lost when all of it was gone, followed by the code you see here, and it was up to a woman to save the movie. And finally, when John Lasseter came back after the European tour of A Bug's Life, he said, "I don't like it, let's redo everything." Chapter 3: Reset Everything. In late 1988, Pixar asked Disney if they could move the date so that they could finish the movie on time, but Disney said no. Then came by March 1999. They finally got a story ready. Now they have 7 months to make the movie. The moment the entire Pixar crew was done with A Bug's Life, they were forced to do Toy Story 2. There was no stopping. It was all, "We need to get this done, and we need to get that one done." So much so that some of the animators had carpal tunnel syndrome, strain injuries, and one animator in particular forgot to take their child to the daycare, and it was a sunny summer. Most of these came from the 2008 book, The Pixar Touch. Finally, fall in 1990 came, and the movie was done. Chapter 4: The Release and Everything After. Toy Story 2 premiered at the El Capitan Theater on November 12, 1999, with a special screening also showing at CalArts. And when the toys came back to town on November 24th, 1999, it was shown with a 1986 Pixar short film, Luxo Jr., with intro text that said, "In 1986, Pixar Animation Studios produced their first film. This is why we have a hopping lamp in our logo." Also, I feel like it's worth mentioning, I think I might have heard a rumor somewhere that the film was originally planned for an IMAX release alongside it, the first movie, but Disney backed out because Disney. A month later, on Christmas Day 1999, they included a blooper reel during the credits. And when the film ended its theatrical run in 2000, it made $245 million domestically and $847 million worldwide. And after a 3D re-release in 2009 and any international re-releases, it bumped it up to 497 million worldwide as of 2024. But when it came to home media in 2000, Costco had 1,000 of the film's DVD, including a scene of the 2000 rated R film High Fidelity. The scene in question included a lot of F-bombs. They quickly recalled the 1,000 copies, and they blamed it on Technicolor. But that wasn't the only controversy the movie had to deal with. During one of the blooper reels, this happened.
Prospector, how about you?
And so you two are absolutely identical? You know, I'm sure I could get you a part in Toy Story 3.
I'm sorry, are we back? Oh, all right.
And ever since the 2019 home media reissue and the Disney Plus release, the scene was taken out of the blooper reel. Moral of the story, make sure you take your time making animation. Unless if you're Phil Lord and Christopher Miller. When Lucasfilm wanted some fresh talent after George Lucas messed up the sequels, they created Rogue One: A Star Wars Story and Solo: A Star Wars Story. Both of them had very complicated productions, but we're only going to focus on one. And in today's story, we're going to see how this movie was actually got 3/4 of the way filming, but they actually had to get rid of their directors, and how they actually replaced their directors. I don't know, I can't quite think of anything. This is the complicated history of Solo: A Star Wars Story. Chapter 1: The Simple Idea. After Disney bought out Lucasfilm in 2012, Bob Iger announced that they would make 2 standalone Star Wars films. Meanwhile, Kathleen Kennedy wanted young and fresh directors, so she hired Gareth Edwards to make a Star Wars movie titled Rogue One. That is something I want to do, but we'll save that for a couple of years. But the other one they wanted to do was a Han Solo origin movie, seeing what they can do with the character before he meets up with Luke and Obi-Wan in A New Hope. So in 2013, it was announced that a Han Solo origin movie was in the works, and it would release in 2018, and they hired 2 directors that you might know. Chapter 2: Lord and Miller. After Lord and Miller joined the team, scriptwriters Lawrence and Jonathan Kasdan to make a story. But when filming started on January 30th, 2017, it was going pretty well, and actually got 3/4 of the movie completed. But during summer of 2017, Lucasfilm fired Lord and Miller due to creative differences, but it was mostly because they couldn't understand Lord and Miller's work ethics. But if you want a random pointless teenager to talk about what happened on set, I'm the random pointless teenager. You see, Disney is just a whiny little and doesn't understand how directors do their work because Disney only sees dollar signs. But back onto the story before I get cancelled. Lucasfilm needed a new director because they were spending already $200 million on it and they couldn't cancel it. So they asked an old friend of George Lucas to see if he wanted to direct it. Chapter 3: A New Director. A couple of weeks later, Ron Howard was announced to take over the project. Although Lord and Miller were kept on as executive producers, the reason why Howard was brought on board was because he had a good friendship with George Lucas. By October 17th, 2017, it was revealed that principal photography was finished. But in March of 2018, Howard announced that he would be refilming 75% of the entire movie. As for Lord and Miller, they kinda didn't care since they were working on Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and probably didn't give the animators no breaks and no money. What is wrong with them? Oh my god. And by April of 2018, the movie was pretty much done, and it was waiting until the release date. Chapter 4: The Release. Solo: A Star Wars Story premiered at the El Capitan Theater in Hollywood on May 10th, 2018, and also had a special screening at the 2018 Cannes Film Festival. But when audiences saw the origin of Han Solo on May 25th, 2018, the results were odd, to say the least. Although praise was given to Donald Glover's performance as Lando, everyone thought the film was okay. As for the original Han Solo, Harrison Ford, he saw it twice and thought it was just okay.
The box office wasn't too kind to the feature, because after the reshoots with Ron Weasley, it gave it a massive $255 million budget, but it only made $213.8 million domestically and $393.2 million worldwide, and it was stated that it needed to make $500 million to break even.
Some of the major issues on why it's failed, like heavy competition like Deadpool 2 and Ocean's 8, not getting a December release, which is why every other 2010 Star Wars film made $1 billion. Disney barely cared about the marketing instead of focusing on Avengers Infinity War and Incredibles 2. And lastly, people were getting tired of Star Wars, especially after the hard backlash on The Last Jedi. After Solo bombed at the box office, Disney and Lucasfilm decided to halt or cancel any standalone films. One of them was an Obi-Wan Kenobi movie, which would have set place in between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. However, since it was no longer a movie, Disney decided, hey, we're going to change it to our new streaming service, Disney+. And that's how we got the TV show, Obi-Wan Kenobi. But they might try it again with The Mandalorian and Grogu, set to release of May of 2026. And let's pray that May release gets them money.
Moral of the story: let the directors do their f***ing job.
After Walt Disney's death in 1966, the animation studio, Walt Disney Feature Animation, was in shambles, but after Roy E. Disney's, Walt's nephew, hired Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg in the 80s, came the Disney Renaissance, where every single one of their movies became a massive hit. But this is how it ended.
And in today's story, we're gonna see how it was planned to be an entirely different movie and needed to be changed months before the deadline hit. This is
The Complicated History of the Emperor's New Groove. Chapter 1: The King with the Idea. After working on The Lion King, one of its directors, Roger Allers, was given a chance at Disney to make a movie unlike any other.
His original plan was something very different and was titled Kingdom of the Sun. The movie was about a selfless emperor and a peasant switching places, but the villain turned the emperor into a llama, and now it's up to him to stop the villain and turn the emperor back into the human. Isn't that right, kids? Dude, we're fucking teenagers.
Production began in 1984 after The Lion King's massive release, and it went pretty smoothly, like hiring Sting to make 6 songs for the movie and letting his wife document the whole movie to see how it will turn out. Fast forward a few years, in 1997, Disney wasn't in a good area with their animated movies. Pocahontas, Hunchback of Notre Dame, and Hercules all underperformed at the box office. So producer of the movie, Randy Fulmer, contacted Mark Dindal, who directed Cats Don't Dance, for Turner Feature Animation, which could probably be its own story in itself, but I'll save that for another time. And as for Allers, on the other hand, he had to deal with some major issues. Chapter 2: Problem After Problem. A year later, the team realized they wouldn't make their planned summer 2008, and to make things worse, the Disney executives went to Randy Folder's office and said, "Your film is this close to being shut down. Give us results." Going back to Allers, after hearing that he had a hard time to getting rid of the footage, because if you leave one scene, the rest doesn't make any sense. So Allers and Dindal decided to take over as director in a bake-off. A few days later, they pitched in their plots. Allers was basically just the same thing. However, Dindal's version made it into a comedy, and everyone liked it. Instead of a dark and powerful story, it just turned into a Looney Tunes comedy made by Disney. And everyone liked it.
So, Allers had no choice, and Mark Dindal was promoted as the director. Although he did ask Allers, hey, do you want to be the co-director? He refused, saying that his time with the movie was done, and he joined the production of Lilo and Stitch. Okay, well, that's good to know. What do I do now?
Chapter 3: Restarting Everything. After Allers left, Michael Eisner, Disney CEO at the time, said that they had 2 weeks to salvage the project. So Randy Fulmer and Mark Dindal halted production to think of a new story. Meanwhile, the animators were assigned to animate the Rhapsody in Blue segment in Fantasia 2000. Fulmer and Dindal had to get rid of a lot of stuff. Romance? Gone. Most of the original cast? Gone. And all of Sting's 6 songs? Gone. Because of all the changes, the movie had to be delayed from its planned summer 2000 date to Christmas 2000. Funny enough that Dinosaur took that summer date. After hearing that his songs were gone from the movie, Sting was not happy. Although the Disney team did ask him to make new songs, he was busy making an album and only had enough time to make 2. In 1999, it was just a mad dash to finish the film on time. Mainly, Disney's other animation studios in Florida, Orlando, Florida, and Paris helped finish the film. In February 2000, the title was changed to Kingdom of the Sun to The Emperor's New Groove, with a new story that was close but different. And a few months before the movie was released, it was completed. Chapter 4: The Release. The Emperor's New Groove premiered at the El Capitan Theater on December 10th, 2000, with a wide release 5 days later on December 15th. Disney had no clue how to market the movie, and to spend most of that marketing money on 102 Dalmatians that Thanksgiving. But both movies stand no chance since they were up against Ron Howard's How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Because of all the things going on, the movie only made $196.6 million worldwide. With a budget of $100 million, it reportedly lost Disney $80 to $100 million. But at least it did better than their rival studio DreamWorks' The Road to El Dorado. Oh, and did I remember that what I said about Sting's wife documenting the whole movie during its production? The Sweatbox was a documentary about the movie and its troubled production, and premiered at the 2002 Toronto Film Festival, and Disney made sure it was never revealed to the public until the movie was leaked in March 2012. Yeah.
Moral of the story: make sure animation has a good story.
When turning a video game character into live action, you always have to make sure you get a good design. But for the Sonic movie, that's its own story.
And in today's story, we're gonna see how this movie was changed from studio to studio, and the internet actually changed something good. This is
The Complicated History of Sonic the Hedgehog. Chapter 1: A Sunny Sony. In 2013, it was announced that Sony Pictures and their company, Columbia Pictures, would team up with Marza Animation to give us a live-action CGI movie about Sonic the Hedgehog. Alongside Marza Animation was Blur Studios, who made some Sonic cutscenes with Tim Miller and Jeff Fowler as the director, being announced in 2016. And then nothing happened for several years. Yeah. Let's fast forward a bit. Chapter 2, Swap Studios. On October 2nd, 2017, it was announced that Sony gave up the rights and gave it to Paramount Pictures, with everyone still sitting in production, and things finally started rolling. However, everyone was skeptical, especially what Sonic could look like. Filming for the movie began on around mid-September 2018, with a planned November 2019 date ready. Everyone at Paramount and the team were ready to show everyone what they made, and the results were mixed. Chapter 3, Design Flaws. On December 9th, 2018, a teaser poster was released, and everyone hated it, with the humanistic design very quickly entering the uncanny valley, but the team said that it would be a good design.
Then, on April 30th, 2019, the trailer was released. It was a fucked up day for the internet.
Immediately, people were questioning Paramount on who designed this and how did this pass. Memes of this thing were online the day of and days later after the trailer released. And most of all, because of this design, people didn't want to see the movie. Because of an ugly design, the trailer got so much dislikes. Paramount said nothing and let the whole thing play out. And thus our story could have ended with people hating the movie and underperforming at the box office and forgetting it ever existed. But then, something happened. Chapter 4, Hope. 3 days later, on May 2nd, 2019, the director Jeff Fowler took to Twitter and said, "Thank you for all the support and criticism. Your message is loud and clear. You aren't happy with the design, and you want some changes. It's going to happen. Everyone at Paramount and Sega are fully committed to making this the best character he can be. Hashtag fix Sonic, hashtag gotta fix fast, emoji thingy, another emoji." Although the movie had to be delayed from its original November 12th, 2019 date to Valentine's Day 2020, people were still shocked that a major movie studio like Paramount actually listened to their audience. To this day, it's an example of major people actually listening to their fans. Fast forward to November 12th, 2019, a new trailer came out and a new design came out, with everyone not being afraid by it. Although one of its VFX studios had to go bankrupt because they had to make the new design and also had to work on the movie Cats, so yeah. With the new design and positive feedback, Paramount and the team can finish the movie and rest. Chapter 5, The Release. The Sonic movie premiered at the Paramount Studio lot on January 25th, 2020, with a wide release on February 14th, 2020. Reviews were very positive, with praise going to the redesign and Jim Carrey's performance as Eggman. Box office also did well, making $319 million worldwide on a $90 million budget. Sure, it could have made more money, but due to real-world events a month later, the theatrical run went a little shorter. To this day, the redesign gave us an example of a studio actually listening to their fans. Take notes, Warner Brothers.
Moral of the story: try to listen to your audience.
The journey to get an indie horror game to the big screen was interesting to say the least.
And in today's story, we're gonna see how this movie was changed from studio to studio and finding a story that looks harder than they think. This is
The Complicated History of Five Nights at Freddy's. Chapter 1: Shield of Hope. In April of 2015, Warner Bros. Pictures acquired the film rights with Roy Lee, David Katzenberg, and Seth Grahame-Smith to produce the movie. Alongside the game's creator Scott Cawthon, they wanted to make an insane, terrifying, and weirdly adorable movie. That July, Gil Kenan, who directed Monster House, the 2015 Poltergeist, and the recent Ghostbusters movie Frozen Empire, was signed on to direct the film alongside Tyler Burton Smith as the writer. And nothing happened for 2 years. Yep, just nothing. Nothing. It's nothing. Let's fast forward a bit. Chapter 2: A New Blumhouse. In March of 2017, Scott Cawthon announced that Blumhouse would be the new production house, after Warner Bros. Put the film in turnaround, aka a film that is stuck in development hell and needed another studio to work on it. I think that's what it said. I don't know if I trust work from Wikipedia. In June, Gil Kenan said that he was no longer directing the project, and in February of 2018, Chris Columbus would replace Kenan as the director and writer. That August, Cawthon revealed that they have started work on the first draft of the film, and that's where things took an interesting turn. Chapter 3: Getting a Good Story. Like I said, Cawthon was working on the first script of the film alongside Kira Breed-Woosley, who co-wrote most of the novels based on the game. But even choosing the perfect adaptation took a while. Some ideas that were tossed around were kids sneaking into Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, or maybe even adapting some of the books. But eventually, someone on the writing team suggested, hey, why don't we adapt the first game? Why haven't we thought of that? Jesus Christ. Also in August, Jason Blum, the founder of Blumhouse, took to Twitter saying that they might aim for a 2020 release. However, a month later, they scrapped the script despite both Jason Blum and Chris Columbus both liking it, making the film be delayed. In June of 2020, during the pandemic, Jason Blum was interviewed by the site Fandom, and his response for the progress of the film was, "It's super active, so I really feel like we have a very good shot on seeing Five Nights at Freddy's movie. I feel like it's really moving forward. It's not stalled or anything else. It's moving forward rapidly. I don't want to put a timeline on it, but soon we'll get a movie. I feel really confident about that." Chapter 4: Trying to Get It Done. Originally, filming was supposed to begin in March of 2021, but due to the pandemic still affecting people around that time, the script not even being completed, filming the movie would be delayed. However, due to all the problems with the movie, Chris Columbus was no longer in the project, leaving around September 2021. In 2022, it seemed like the movie was almost ready, with Jim Henson's Creature Shop working on the animatronic characters, and in October of that year, Emma Tammi would be replacing Columbus as the director of the film. Filming for the movie finally began in February of 2023 and was wrapped 2 months later in April. And now, with the movie nearly completed, it was now time to show them what took them so long. Chapter 5: The Release. The Five Nights at Freddy's movie was finally released on October 27, 2023. Although the release had some controversy, with it releasing in theaters and on Universal's streaming service Peacock on the same day, the film still did surprisingly well. Although the critics didn't like it, the audience took it well. As for its box office, it had to go with no marketing due to the Hollywood strikes, but it still made $297.2 million worldwide with a budget of $20 million. With the movie being a hit, you know what that means? Sequel! Announced at CinemaCon 2024, the movie is currently filming right now as of this video's release, and is aiming for a December 2025 release.
Moral of the story, good things can take some time.
Like Justice League, the 2016 Suicide Squad movie had its own problems. And in today's story, we're gonna see how a maniac like Jared Leto did weird things on set, and how David Ayer's movie was taken away from him. This is the complicated history of Suicide Squad. Chapter 1: A Fast-Tracked Universe. In 2009, the movie was announced to be in the works, with producer Dan Lin, which you may know him for producing the Sherlock Holmes movies, and executive producing that one Robert Rodriguez movie, Shorts. You know, Shorts. Fast forward to 2014, and David Ayer was hired to direct the project, and it would take place in the new DCEU at the time. And I said at the time. Originally, Steppenwolf would have been the villain of the movie, controlling Enchantress. Ooh. But since Zack Snyder was already using him for his Justice League movie, he had to rewrite the script 6 weeks before filming started. And filming started on April 13th, 2015. And the filming went pretty well, unless if you had to deal with a maniac like Jared Leto. You see, if you worked with Jared Leto on the set of Suicide Squad, it was very messed up. For example, he would give some of his co-stars a live rat, random bullets, a dead pig, and even weird shit that I can't say on this channel because of all the teens and young adults watching. Anyway, filming wrapped on August 2015, and a special preview was shown at Comic-Con 2015, which originally would have looked like what David Ayer's version of the thing would have been like. Chapter 2: A Worried Shield. On March 25th, 2016, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice released in theaters to a strong box office, but had some very bad reviews, mainly saying that it's too dark. And hey, look at that, their next DCEU movie is Suicide Squad, which is also dark. So, Warner Brothers took his cut and hired a company named Trailer Park, which edited trailers for the movie to edit the actual movie. WB asked for more reshoots to add pop songs like Guardians of the Galaxy, and make it a comedy like Deadpool. Of course, David Ayer was furious with Warner Brothers, and yeah, they still make stupid decisions. Anyway, with the movie completely changed, they decided to release it. Chapter 3: The Release. Suicide Squad had its premiere on August 1st, 2016 in New York City. Then it premiered everywhere in the US and everywhere else on August 5th, 2016. Although it broke records for some IMAX screens and eventually made over $746.8 million worldwide, the critics and audiences did not like it. Shocker, I know. Mainly because of all the pop songs and comedy. Shocker, I know. And remember, this is the same company that thought Cartoon Network was useless, canceling multiple movies that were completed, and most importantly, changing the movie. Speaking of, Chapter 4, The Ayer Cut. After Zack Snyder was finally given a chance to show off his version of Justice League in 2021, fans wanted to see how Ayer's cut of Suicide Squad compared to the one we've gotten. But no matter how much times a Warner Brothers executive just kept saying, "Why?" And then the response was eventually, "No." And including David Ayer, which he does always say that he would love to see his version in interviews, but no matter what, Warner Brothers keeps saying no. That is, until James Gunn came in and was given the co-CEO position at DC's movie division, and fans thought, hey, there might still be a chance of Ayer's cut Suicide Squad being a chance to be shown. But I believe that will most likely maybe never happen since he already rebooted the DCEU and wanted nothing to do with it. Especially because the main focus isn't on Ayer's cut of Suicide Squad at the moment. The main focus is James Gunn's Superman movie, set for July 2025, so the main focus is on that for now, so it could take a little bit more longer to get Ayer's cut of Suicide Squad. Moral of the story, never, ever, ever work with Warner Brothers. Adapting the Wizard of Oz book by L. Frank Borum was no short of an easy task. Literally. And in today's part 1 of 2 story, we're gonna see how this movie was part of every old studio that just wanted a musical in the 1930s, and how most actors on set had problems off and on set. This is The Complicated History of the Wizard of Oz, Part 1. Chapter 1. The Previous Attempts. In 1900, L. Frank Barum took inspiration from these made-up fantasy stories he told to his kids and friends, and made the book The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. If you want to look up what L. Frank Barum did in his life before Oz, please don't. But back on topic, the first attempt of live-action adaptation was a stage play in 1902. L. Frank Barum did write the script, but the guy who was working on it decided to change everything about it, and ended up being a surprising success, with it going on 6 years later. But then there are a lot, and I mean a lot of stuff based on the Oz books. And if I list them all, then we would be here all day. But some examples include the 1910 movie based off the musical and its 2 lost sequels, the 1913 musical play, the Tick-Tock Man of Oz, the 1925 silent film adaptation, and the 1933 animated short film. Now, I may have skipped over some things, but in 1919, L. Frank Barum died from a stroke at the age of 62. And that left more things to happen after his death, but for more info, I would suggest to go to another channel to see what happened. I'm just the worst version that you just randomly found. But from the 1920s to the 30s, Hollywood just didn't want to make more fantasy films. Until Chapter 2. A New Version. Walt Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs changed cinema, not only being the first animated motion picture, but it gave Hollywood the courage to make more fantasy films. After learning this, Louis B. Mayer, one of the co-founders of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer/MGM, wanted to buy the film rights, but at that point it was owned by the other co-owner of MGM, Samuel Goldwyn. I won't even mention how he got it in the first place. But to get the rights, he had to pay $75,000, roughly $1.3 million in today's numbers. He also heard of an up-and-coming actress at MGM named Julie Garland, and thought she was a good choice to play Dorothy.
However, many different stories happen that I can't be sure if it's true or not. Some say that Trudy Garland was treated like shit by the studio and her mother. Others say that Mervyn LeRoy asked MGM to just make an Oz adaptation. It was a crazy mess, but eventually, they started production.
Chapter 3: Problems Before Filming. Norman Taurog, who won Best Director for his movie Skippy, was chosen as the director of Oz, while other people like Yip Harburg and Harold Allen for the music, who were given the impossible task of making the music more narrative and less standalone like any old musical back then. Then there were the many different scripts. Some of them adapted the stage play, some of them didn't understand the magical elements in the story, and some screenwriters wrote major important scenes that just didn't get any credit, but the script credit went towards Noel Langley and 2 other people that I don't know. Other problems were the casting. Before Judy, the studio really wanted to get Shirley Temple as the role of Dorothy, or really anyone young like Dina Durbin. Like, they were also considered for Dorothy, like other actors, like, I don't know. But Judy still stayed as Dorothy because the people liked her. Other actors that were added, like Ray Bolger as the Scarecrow, Burt Lahr as the Cowardly Lion, and Buddy Epson as the Tin Man. With everyone that they got, they can now start filming. Chapter 4: The Filming Process. Filming started on October 12th, 1938. However, before filming started, Norman Taurog left the project in order to work on another movie he made. Meanwhile, they asked Richard Chope to be the new director, and he said yes. Also, the movie's budget was getting pretty expensive, not only to build massive sets, but also using 3-strip Technicolor film, which was a rarity back in the day. But then there was Gail Syndergaard, the person who was originally supposed to play the Wicked Witch of the West. She left due to her preserving her beauty and just, she can't be ugly for her role, ew. And so her role was replaced by Margaret Hamilton. But when filming started, the first 12 days became infamous due to many things. 2 sequences were shot, Dorothy meeting Scarecrow and performing If I Only Had a Brain, and the ending was final act at the Witch's Castle where the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, and the Cowardly Lion say Dorothy from the Wicked Witch of the West. Alongside other things like Dorothy being blonde, the Yellow Brick Road looking different, and most of the footage ended up being lost media. However, one actor in particular caused problems and almost caused the movie to get shut down. Chapter 5: One Mistake and the Aftermath. Buddy Epson, the actor who played the Tin Man, trust me, it all makes sense, had problems with his makeup. But to be more specific, to make him look like the Tin Man, they had to cover his face with grease paint and aluminum dust. However, the side effect to all of this, he had to breathe it in, and after 10 days, his lungs were powdered with aluminum, aka he can't breathe. So after all of that, he was sent to the hospital for 6 weeks. But the studio heads at MGM questioned if it was still worthy to continue. They were also thinking of just shutting down production altogether, but the producer, Mervyn LeRoy, convinced everyone at MGM to continue the movie with some changes. Mervyn made some major changes, like firing Richard Thorpe as the director because he didn't have that charm like they used to, and they changed to Richard Corcoran. after his movie, Gone with the Wind, had its own problems and joined Oz while waiting for reshoots of his film. Other changes were ditching the blonde wig for Dorothy, the yellow brick road looking like an actual yellow brick road, and some makeup changes, especially for the Tin Man, plus other characters like the Scarecrow and the Wicked Witch of the West. Speaking of the Tin Man, Jack Haley was brought on board after Richard left with all of his hospital stuff. And instead of aluminum powder, they used aluminum paste. Even if it gave Jack an eye infection and he had to sit in the dark room to be healed back to normal. You know, normal stuff. Mervyn LeRoy really made some changes that everyone liked and thought his version can continue without any, and I mean any, major setbacks. But this was only the beginning of this nightmare. They still had a long yellow brick road ahead of them. We're not quite done. And in today's second part story, we're going to take a look at the many injuries that happen on set and many creative clashes with the studio and the director. This is The Complicated History of the Wizard of Oz, Part 2. Chapter 6. Completing the Mess. With a new director, George Cukor, he really changed things, but only a week later, he had to work on Gone with the Wind. So, to fill in the shoes, Victor Fleming was brought on board and filming continued. Immediately when Fleming entered, they had problems. Once again. For example, when shooting all of the Tin Man scenes, they accidentally filmed all of his scenes with the shiny suit, aka when Dorothy and Scarecrow meet him, he's shiny, not rusty, which might cause some filming issues that spend the crew a couple of $1,000s. It's not that bad. But another problem happened with the lighting because they wanted to shoot all of the scenes in Oz with 3 strip Technicolor cameras. They had to use massive lights, sometimes from what's available, and sometimes they just steal from other people, aka they cause a couple of blackouts in a few cities, and the set itself was usually around 100 degrees, so they had to spend more money. So, the producers at MGM were left with one question. Do you continue the movie with all of its stuff? But Mervyn LeRoy, the producer, always had to make sure that they wouldn't cancel the movie. Multiple times. But yet, there were still more problems with the movie. Chapter 7. Problem after problem. Getting towards the finish line was rough. Many of the famous incidents of the movie happened around this time. So, to save time, I will talk about them right here, right now. Margaret Hamilton, aka the Wicked Witch of the West, was filming her disappearance from Munchenland that needed a trapdoor and a fire. But on one of the takes, the fire went a little bit early, leaving her some scars on her face and right arm, leaving her in the hospital for a few days. But when she returned, she was asked if she wanted to do a stunt with smoke, and she said no. So they had to hire a stunt double, but on one take, the smoke machine that they used blew up and damaged the stunt double so bad that they had to get a goddamn hysterectomy. Which, if you don't know, because most of my audiences is teenagers, you can't have children. Other small mentions include 2 flying monkeys fell because their cable was snapped, a choreographer was drunk and fell into a trapdoor, landing on top of someone, and Terry the Terrier, the dog that played Toto, had to recover because some random extra stepped on her back. But one of the most infamous was during the poppy flower scene, because the fake snow that was covered on them, it basically gave everyone pure asbestos. Or was it Crispon? I don't know. But those two somehow lead directly into cancer. Yeah, but that was like before everyone knew that it was bad. But in pure American way, they did not care. And reminder, most of these events happened near each other, but filming finally wrapped in March of 1939. Chapter 8: Post-Production Problems. When entering post-production, Victor Fleming was let go because George Cukor really messed up Gone with the Wind, and Victor had to save another movie, leaving directing duties to King Vidor, which shockingly they did not know, because Fleming was the only person known as the director, and King Vidor was only in the post-production and wasn't even noticed until he died. So, yeah. During post-production, there were mainly two groups. One group had to do reshoots until June. The other one had to do months of sound work, like re-recording dialogue that didn't fit, making sure that the Tin Man metal sounds led up to the music, perfecting a tornado before CGI, and the usual studio interference. You know, all those. And because MGM wanted to be because MGM wanted the movie to be under 2 hours, multiple song reprises like Ding Dong the Witch is Dead and Somewhere Under the Rainbow was cut, and even an entire song called The Jitterbug, because I guess it wouldn't even make sense, would it? But during one test screening, MGM cut the song Over the Rainbow because they didn't want to stay in Kansas for too long. But Mervyn LeRoy once again had to make sure it stayed in the picture, where he succeeded. And finally, after a long journey, the movie was completed. Chapter 9: The Release. The Wizard of Oz premiered at the Oprium Theater in Green Bay, Wisconsin on August 10th, 1939, and would eventually go across the United States on August 25th, 1939. Despite the wonderful reviews, the budget was $2.8 million, and it only made $3 million, so that's not enough to make Bad Kid's budget. During awards season, it tried its best, but it only got a few wins, mainly because it was overshadowed by Gone with the Wind, directed by Victor Fleming. You know, the guy that saved the Wizard of Oz. That. You know, that. And also because another major key point of its failed box office, it just so happened that World War II was starting, and some of the international markets had to close. Then after the war, and some re-releases later, it made $27 million by 1955. And then around the 1950s, it was entering obscurity, and people thought, oh, it's gonna be that movie. However, one event would change the reputation of the movie. Chapter 10: A Second Chance. On November 3rd, 1956, CBS bought the rights to show it on television from MGM, and during that broadcast, it had 45 million people tune in, and it was a massive success. So they replayed it a few years later, and then some years after that, and then eventually it became an annual tradition to play the film on television during the holiday season. And with more love to the movie, it became one of the greatest of old classic cinema, with many more adaptations, sometimes changing the story, but still having that wonder and charm, or it can still just be the same story. And as time moves on and the world gets a little bit more crazy, The Wizard of Oz will always be remembered for having the most infamous production and still having its wonder and charm. Moral of the story, things just take some time.